So from the budget analysis, let's move to another very critical sector, which has got to do with the power sector. Markwe?
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. I have with me Mr. Rumundaka Wonodi, who is the former managing director of the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, electricity is a very critical sector to even the budget. People believe that if the electricity sector is working as it should, our GDP will be unstoppable, as it were. What is your own contribution? Because we've seen in the last couple of days, the Minister of Power Works and Housing seems to be a bit livid with the behavior of the discos, as it were, telling them that they were not forced to buy the power assets. What precisely do you think is going on?
Well, I think that if you look at what's been happening in the sector, there has been some challenges around liquidity, issues to do with how much is being collected by the distribution companies, how much they are remitting or paying to the bulk trader for onward transmission to generation company and the transmission company. And so you have these challenges, and the government is working very hard to kind of sort this out. And one of the things that they wanted to do is to say, look, let's aggregate the money that you're collecting, let's see how it is, and be able to spread it across the other operators in the sector while we try to find money to fix the gap. But it would seem that the distribution companies have been very resistant to that. And I think that the minister and maybe the agencies and even the generation companies have expressed frustration at that behavior.
Why are they resistant to that? Why do you think they will be resistant to that? You advise energy companies nowadays. Why do you think that the discos will be resistant to something that should benefit everybody?
Well, I think that maybe you have to marry incentives with whatever anybody does. Probably they want to keep a larger share of that, and they also want to be able to control and be able to take care of their operations the way they prefer. One of the things that we've heard in the industry is a claim that some of the subcontracts that the distribution companies award are inflated. Therefore, maybe there is a transfer of money from the distribution company to maybe the investors or what have you. So for operational, they might want operational independence, one. That could be a principle of business, or maybe there is something that they just want to gain and they don't want to share with other people.
Well, the minister was definitely very livid. There's so many things that he said here. Talking about that, the role of MBET, for instance. You used to head MBET. Just quickly clarify this for us. For a long time, they said that there was no money to even run MBET. So MBET was not able to pay the GENCOs to fulfill its mandate. Was that really the situation?
Well, I don't know it's right to say there is not enough money to run the bulk trader. The bulk trader has money for its operations.
Did the bulk trader get the money that it was supposed to get to be able to pay the GENCOs? Well,
they're not getting that money, but it's not like it's got to come from appropriation. It's money that is expected to come from the distribution companies. They need to pay on their vesting contracts, and then the bulk trader will pay the generation companies. So to the extent that the distribution companies were not paying, making full payments, then the bulk trader could not pay. But then there's a capitalization for the bulk trader that should allow it to top up and pay whatever the difference is. But that capitalization is not for a situation where you've supplied power and someone is not paying. There's what you call availability. So if a generation company is ready to produce and it's unable to deliver power, maybe because of load rejection or maybe because of outage in gas, it is entitled what you call a capacity payment. That capacity payment allows the generation company to meet its fixed cost of staff payment, debt, and what have you. So that capacity payment is something that is an assurance from the bulk trader to pay that. But then I think that there's reticence on this part of the bulk trader to use its capitalization, because it has to be that you have a cost-reflective tariff. The industry is at an equilibrium for them to do that. So there's been some reticence in trying to inject that capital. I'm sure they still have the capital to do that, but apparently with the gap in tariff, they might not be able to sustain the industry.
When you say gap in tariff, what does that mean?
Well, as you know, sometime last year, the regulator came out with a new tariff. That was deemed to be cost reflective, which means that with that tariff, everyone in the industry could get paid and there should be no gap, right? But what happened is that someone went to court and challenged the regulator. And then the court came back and then upturned that new tariff. So we reverted to an old tariff. Now, that tariff is not cost reflective. But between then and now, there have been some macroeconomic shifts, right? So the exchange rate is gone from the 190 that was in the tariff to 305 or 385, depending on where you want to peg it at. So that is not reflected in the tariff. And therefore, that tariff just can't do it.
It's a very, I know that Nigerians do not like to talk about tariff. I mean, the electricity providers believe that we cannot move forward unless we discuss this. But at the same time, because electricity supply has not been as constant as it should have been, you know, there is always a reluctance on the part of the customers to pay more, especially when the metering, this prepaid metering has not gone round.
No, that is right. That is correct. You know, one of the things that is a gap in the supply, you know, people always say, look, when Nigerians generate power through diesel or petrol, that the cost is about 90 naira, it could be 100, it could be 80, and therefore, that if you ask them to pay 40 naira from the distribution company, that they should be happy to. But the truth of the matter is that people do not bake in what you call reliability, right? Which is that if I have my generator, I get the power when I want it, right? So if I pay that, I know when I'm getting. There's no need for me to pay 40 naira when I'm not at home or when I don't know when it's going to come. So one of the things that distribution companies have been encouraged to do is to give some predictability to when power comes so that I know when it's coming and I can plan around that. It will make me feel more, you know, willing to pay a higher cost if that is there. But the unreliability, unpredictability is challenging. But that said, the tariff is not where it needs to be. That said, it does not mean that you have to transfer it, that cost, to the consumers at this time, which was why the last tariff structure had consumers paying little or paying less for 2 years, 3 years, and then it begins to go up when you expect that, you know, there will be better supply and then even more supply, and then the distribution companies can recover the money to make up for the under collection in the early years. So that's how it's structured. We want to have, but the thing is that if you do not have that tariff where people, investors, and everybody can look at it, then even equity providers or debt providers may be unwilling to put capital in the market. So that's really the whole idea of having a cost reflective. It does not mean that you want to immediately transfer that cost to the consumers, but at least you can see a pathway if you need to fund it, what exactly to do. So
are you saying that MBET will not be able to effectively play its role until that tariff issue is addressed?
Well, I think that it's not just MBET, transmission company, the gas suppliers, everyone, you know, we find it very challenging to play their role unless they know where and there is a viable, financially viable, you know, value chain for each segment to play each part. So it's not just about the MBET or what have you. It's about every other person within the sector. Transmission company will not be able to invest or even raise capital, private capital, to invest in the infrastructure.
Well, the minister did have quite a bit of words for the discos whom he met with, I think it was on Monday or so. He said something about the 701.9 billion naira intervention fund is consistent with government's policy and determination to enable businesses flourish, and it was intended to save the GENCOs, the gas companies and their financiers who were providing service from collapse. He said that their statement, apparently they had released a statement before then, did not tell members of the public that the companies were not getting paid because they were not remitting all they should have to MBET and the market operator, admittedly, because of reasons that are partly their fault, that's the disco's fault, and partly not their fault. It does say something about, you know, the situation that the gas companies, the generating companies are facing. It would seem that right now the discos are wielding quite a bit of power against the GENCOs. Is that what is happening?
Well, to the extent that the revenue comes from the distribution companies. So it's the consumer who pays a distribution company, the aggregation of that goes up the value chain to generation companies. And if the discos are keeping disappropriate portion of that to themselves, then the others are suffering. So what the 701 billion is supposed to do is to make sure that there is adequate money to top up whatever comes from them, to make sure that generation companies and gas suppliers, get paid and can make investments. One of the things that we've seen in the sector is that since the private sector took over most of a large chunk of the operatorship, there's been consistent investment in generation companies. They've grown their capacity. Gas suppliers have made some investments. We've not seen much in the distribution sector is challenging. But for the people who have made these investments, if they do not get paid, right, they run into the trouble.
You also leave out one huge chunk, one very huge important chunk, which is transmission.
Yes, transmission. Transmission is
Are they making the investments to match that of the GenCos?
Unfortunately, transmission is still within government. Government is trying as much as it can, but it's not making enough. Some of the funding for transmission is predicated on being able to go out there and raise capital, right? Or actually have vendor financing or contractor financing. You give a portion of the grid to a contractor, they build it out, and they pay. But you see, in that multi-year tariff that discos charge, there's an element for transmission, right? And that component assumes that the transmission company makes certain amount of investment every year, and then a charge for financing cost is being put in the tariff. Now, when the discos are not remitting enough money, it is challenging for the transmission company to borrow. That's why I said that, look, it's not just about MBET, the bulk trader, it's about transmission, it's about generation, it's about everybody along the value chain. So you need that cost-reflective tariff for people to go out. The government's intention is not to always fund the transmission, but because they own it, they have to continue from historical to continue to fund it.